it occurs to me that I should probably sit down and talk about The Boy and the Heron, or How Do You Live, the latest film from, seems weird to say, the latest film from in 2024, but the latest film from animation slash filmmaking legend and icon Hayao Miyazaki. Um, it's a monumental event, really. I would say this. I think he just turned 83 today, actually, as of the recording of this video, in early January of 2024. An absolute legend of cinema. To take animation out of the equation, he's just a great movie maker, a great filmmaker, a great director, and a great storyteller. And he had this amazing career, and he decided to call it quits, that he was done, and then he came back. And then he decided he was done after that. And then he came back again. And then he really was done. He's done with filmmaking. And then he came back again. And then that was it. That was the last note, just to make a nice little film for young children. Then he came back again with The Wind Rises. And that's when he made a press conference I'm fully, definitely, actually retiring now. And then he came back again. But this time he's not announced his retirement, and he's in fact apparently working on another film. So Godspeed, so to speak, Hayao Miyazaki, just one of the all-time greats. And I'm not really going to review the film as such in this video. I just want to talk about my experience of going to see it, my general impressions of the film without spoiling too much, and maybe just a central question: is this another Miyazaki masterpiece? And it seems like there's a bit of a fairly even split of people who think that it's amazing, it's beautiful, it's fantastic, and there's some people who think that it's very weird and perhaps not as refined as some of his other films, and not quite as impactful or as cohesive. So my experience of seeing the film was an arduous one, to say the least, and I'm going to get into that now a little bit, and a little bit of a real life story. So it came out on Boxing Day in the UK. And so I wanted to go and see it. The just seeing a Miyazaki film in the cinema was a huge deal for me. I first got into his films properly and heavily 10 years ago in 2014. I've never had the chance since then because he's been retired, but also I just haven't had it's never lined up for me to go to see, like, because they show Studio Ghibli films in the cinema all the time in various different kind of programs and one-off events. And when I lived near London, I really wanted to get to one of the Prince Charles Cinema screenings, but it never lined up timing wise. So this was a great chance for me to go and see, a new film of his in the cinema, and I absolutely had to see it subtitled, not dubbed. So that was a big sticking point for me. But it's Boxing Day, and my time over Christmas was incredibly like stacked, and so the only real window of time I had was Boxing Day in the evening. But I had to finish work an hour early, sacrifice an hour's pay. But there was no trains, no buses into the city, so I had to walk. And, doing Christmas Day and everything goes along with that, and being exhausted by that, and then going into work the next day. And then after that, walking for 90 minutes to go see a film is a pretty, again, arduous experience. But it was worth it for Miyazaki. And I actually had quite a nice walk. I walked across this barrage that goes across Cardiff Bay, and very cold, very windy, but I had my nice kind of Primark winter jacket on, which actually is surprisingly and deceptively effective at keeping me warm and dry. But looking out into the ocean, because one side is Cardiff Bay, the other side is just inky black, just goes on forever while you kind of see England at the other side. But it was just this immense mass of water at night with hardly any lights around, and rough waters, and way off in the distance I saw this thin strip of light that reminded me so much of that shot in Spirited Away, when Chihiro first sees the kind of the boats as night begins to fall on her first day at the bathhouse and stuff. So that was kind of a cool little, very Miyazaki kind of looking visual in real life. But getting to the cinema, getting a hot dog, which was like, because I realized I had no food, and it was like Boxing Day and everything was shut, so I had to buy a ridiculously overpriced hot dog in the cinema, and gratefully chomped it down before the film started. And as there was a couple of teenagers coming in who were like giggling and laughing, and I was like gripping my armrest almost, thinking like, you fucking better not do this to me now. I've gone through all this. And thankfully, as soon as the film started, it was an absolutely perfect viewing audience, which is, you know, that is a unicorn right there of an experience in the cinema. And another thing is that, hardly anywhere was showing it. So the cheapest cinema in Cardiff wasn't showing it. My regular cinema wasn't showing it, and so I had to walk an extra 20 minutes to get to my old regular cinema, in which the standards have slipped drastically, in my opinion, which is Cineworld. It's just one of those things where I don't know. I have many complaints about that place, but sometimes you have a good experience. This happily was one of those, and the film starts, and I'm thinking, wow, new music by Joe Hisaishi and new visuals from Hayao Miyazaki, and just taking in the wonder of that. And the opening sequence where this young boy is kind of running through the flames. This village has been bombed, and his mother's in a hospital, and it's World War II, and it's very evocative, and the kind of scratchiness, the rawness of the animation felt very Takahata-esque to me, in the sense that this felt like a real, it reminds you of Grave of the Fireflies, but there's also the impressionistic kind of where characters begin to change and the animation style begins to change. It reminded me of things that Takahata had done in The Tale of the Princess Kaguya and also Grave of the Fireflies. But then we kind of settle into our kind of typical Spirited Away style Miyazaki film. I would say it has the most in common with that film, but it also reminded me of When Marnie Was There, which is not a Miyazaki film, but a Studio Ghibli film. And that you can kind of point to, oh, it's a bit like this Miyazaki film, it's a bit like that Miyazaki film, but it is in its own way unique as well. And that just felt weird to me because I'm so intimately familiar with his filmography. That 11, I think it's 11 films that he made. Let's just count them: Castle Cagliostro, Lupin the Third, Nausicaa, The Valley of the Wind, Castle in the Sky, Laputa, My Neighbor Totoro, Kiki's Delivery Service, My Favorite Porco Rosso, Princess Mononoke, Spirited Away, Howl's Moving Castle, Ponyo, and The Wind Rises. 11, which now makes 12 feature films, I should add. Those 11 films are so ingrained in me that seeing a new one almost felt like it wasn't really a Miyazaki film. So it was kind of an interesting kind of meta thing going on inside my head, where my mind is not kind of sitting there just enjoying the movie. I'm like, wow, I can't believe this is a new, like, it just felt weird. It's one of those strange things, and it's almost like everything that he's done before is the way that he has to do everything, and when you see him do something new, it's like, well, that's not very Miyazaki-like, but I love that about it. And this young boy who loses his mother and is now faced with the kind of the situation of having a new mother, who I didn't know who this woman was supposed to be until, like, I guess near the end of the film, and it actually is his aunt. He comments on how, like, she looks exactly like my mother, but I didn't realize that there was, like, an actual, biological reason for that. I don't think it's really said in the English subtitles that this is his aunt, who is now kind of bearing a child with his father. So it's a very complicated family situation for this young boy who goes on this mystical journey into another world and is guided by this heron, this grey heron character, who's a very grotesque and funny and interesting, I was going to say cat, but in the term of, like, there's some cats I got to hang with, but, he's very much a bird, a heron, and I really can't wait to see the English dub at some point to see what the hell Robert Pattinson did with that, because holy shit, that just doesn't seem like his type of role at all, which is precisely why he probably nailed it. But I did go with the Japanese version, and I was glad that I did. But I feel like ultimately the film, without going into really any specifics at all, was really, there's a huge theme of acceptance in many different forms. Accepting situations and accepting inevitabilities, perhaps, and accepting bad situations and accepting good situations too, I think. It's not spoiling much to say that I think that the Heron character learns and kind of grows to accept that he can let someone in to be a friend or to be an ally, whereas the boy, of course, has to learn to accept what's happened to him to move forward with his life, because if he doesn't accept this horrible situation of his mother passing, then he's going to be stuck forever, and that kind of manifests itself literally in this world where he might be stuck forever, but also the characters that he meets along the way and the journey that he goes on is very particularly colored by his family's history, and that is what really bolsters, I think, his journey towards acceptance. And so that's kind of the major theme of the film, I would say. There's a few really beautiful sequences that really took my breath away. The one is I forget what they're called. I think it's the Wara Wara, WARAWARA, Wara Wara, which doesn't roll off my tongue very well, but I think that's what they were called. And these little white doughy ball things that kind of in that world seem to symbolize the purity of a soul before conception, which for me was very powerful. Very whimsical in the way that it's portrayed, but also very, again, breathtaking. And some of those visuals in the mystical world in which this boy is drawn into were just beautiful. And the score, very delicate, very meaningful, not as kind of sweeping and symphonic, I think, as Joe Hisaishi tends to be at times with Miyazaki's films, but very, I don't know, tempered and yet effective and emotive and really quite beautiful. So I love the film. I don't think that it's a masterpiece, but I don't think that it's a confusing mess either. And I think that it's a film that you're not really supposed to take in the most literal of terms. I think that a lot of it is in the vein of, say, a David Lynch film, where it's how does it make you feel? The original Japanese title, How Do You Live? It really feels like, if someone was to say to me, well, it didn't make it, logically it didn't line up with this, I would say, well, how do you feel? It's not, how do you think about these things lining up in a way that makes sense to you in your lived reality? How does it make you feel when you see that combination of images and sound and story? And so that was for me the powerful aspect, was that it was, and you can say all that until you're blue in the face, but sometimes there are just films that are just absolutely incomprehensible, and they even feel pretentious, that they're like, oh, this is really strange and mysterious, and how does it make you feel or whatever, and it's just toss, but this isn't, because it feels so crafted, and it feels specific and surprising at the same time, I would say. So yeah, that's kind of my basic thoughts on The Boy and the Heron. And as I walked out, there was a woman with a few friends, and she was talking about a specific element near the end of the film, and it was really like, well, I think that this meant that, and that was really about this and that, and it to me it felt like it was breaking it down into too simple of a kind of, figuring out the jigsaw, which I don't feel like was really the point, in a sense. But anyway, as I left, I walked out of the cinema and it was pissing down. So I had a long walk with my hands in my pockets, hood up around my face like this. And I quite enjoyed it, actually. I don't know, there's something kind of therapeutic about it. It was nice to kind of just have the rain and, the ocean next to me as I walked for a big chunk of that walk back home. And I don't know, the elements. It was a nice reflective experience. Seeing a film like that, which is so layered and kind of impressionable, like you can really make your own impressions of it and think about things. And I don't know, I was thinking about a lot of the sequences in the film as I was walking home. Sometimes you don't get that. Sometimes you watch a film at home and then you got to go to bed, or you got to do this, you got to do that, and the sinking in part can be lost, a lost art at times. And so I really loved that kind of just solitary, rain-soaked but solitary kind of moment, a very elongated moment. Another 90-minute walk back home, but it was nice. So I just want to talk about it, make a video about it. That's pretty much it. There's no deep analysis on the film, no real, specific review of things that happen or anything. I thought that it was a special film, not a masterpiece. I think it's probably in like the middle to lower ranking for me of his films. If I was to think about like what's my favorite, I would say I probably prefer it to a film like Spirited Away, which I think is a masterpiece that's kind of overrated. But I think Spirited Away is a better film than The Boy and the Heron, but I think I might prefer and enjoy The Boy and the Heron a little bit more. And I would say nearer the bottom for me is probably, and there's no bottom with Miyazaki. It's just the least really good or the least great, you know. But the true kind of Miyazaki masterpieces, they're pretty untouchable. And I wasn't going in expecting something like that. But there was a little small sliver of me that was thinking, man, he spent like 7 years making this, you know, and there was no trailers. That was the big thing when it was released in Japan. I just thought this is going to look unlike anything we've ever seen before, which wasn't true. It looked like most Studio Ghibli films, but I was really taken with it, and I'm looking forward to seeing it again. I have heard people say they enjoy it more on subsequent viewings, but it was touching, it was exciting, and striking. Yeah, some really great sequences. So I'm looking forward to it coming out on home video, so I can kind of watch it with the English dub and kind of watch it with Connie. I was really upset I couldn't see it with Connie. Unfortunately, it was just the timing again didn't match up. But that's pretty much my thoughts on The Boy and the Heron and my experience with it. Let me know your thoughts if you have any. Thank you for watching. I'm feeling myself actually begin to fall asleep as I'm delivering this last sign off. That's weird. That doesn't really happen that often. Um, I think I already said thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one where I will hopefully be a bit more alert. Good night.